Dr. Hyunwoo Park rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the equations on his screen for the 1,000th time. The numbers still made no sense, but somehow they worked. His small laboratory on Luna Station felt cramped and stuffy after 3 weeks of non-stop work. Coffee cups and food containers covered every flat surface, and the air recycler hummed loudly in the corner. "Run it again," he told his assistant, Dr. So-Young Kim, who sat at the computer terminal across the room. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she entered the same calculations they had been checking all morning. Dr. Tae-min Lee stood near the quantum field generator, watching the energy readings on his tablet. The machine was no bigger than a refrigerator, but it contained some of the most advanced technology humans had ever built. "Still getting the same results," he said. "The field strength is holding steady." Hyunwoo walked to the small window and stared out at the gray surface of the moon. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue and white marble. For 300 years, humans had been trapped in their solar system while other alien species traveled between the stars. The Galactic Council had faster-than-light ships that could cross the galaxy, but their technology was slow. It took weeks or months to travel between star systems. Humans had tried to copy alien technology, but they always failed. Human scientists were smart, but they thought differently than aliens. What worked for other species did not work for humans, so humanity remained stuck, watching from far away as the rest of the galaxy lived and traded and explored. "Dr. Park," So-Young called out. "The numbers are confirmed. The space-time calculations show we can fold space in a way that creates instant travel." Hyunwoo turned back to his team. "But the energy requirements are impossible. We would need to rip holes in space itself." Taemin looked up from his tablet. "Actually, that might be exactly what we need to do. Look at these quantum readings. When we generate enough power, we don't just bend space, we tear it." The 3 scientists gathered around Taemin's tablet. The energy wave patterns looked like nothing they had seen before. Instead of smooth curves, the lines were jagged and sharp like broken glass. "This is dangerous," So-Young said quietly. "We're talking about cutting holes in reality itself." Hyunwoo stared at the data. Every instinct told him this was wrong, but the mathematics were perfect. "Let's build a small test probe, something we can send to Proxima Centauri and back." It took them 2 weeks to build the probe. The device was simple, just a metal sphere with basic instruments and a tiny version of their space-folding engine. They called it the Void Drive because it seemed to punch holes through empty space. The test chamber was a sealed room next to the laboratory. Hyunwoo, So-Young, and Tae-min stood behind thick glass walls as they prepared for the first test. The probe sat on a metal platform in the center of the room. "All systems ready," Tae-min reported. "Energy levels at maximum." "Destination locked," So-Young added. "Proxima Centauri system, 4 light-years away." Hyunwoo took a deep breath. "Begin the test." The quantum field generator started humming. The probe began to glow with a strange, purple light. The air around it seemed to bend and twist like heat waves. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the probe vanished. The 3 scientists stared at the empty platform. Their instruments showed no energy readings, no heat, nothing. The probe had simply disappeared. "Did it work?" So-Young whispered. Before anyone could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside their laboratory. Over the intercom, a voice announced, "All personnel report to emergency stations. Unknown. Energy signature detected." Hyunwoo ran to his computer terminal and pulled up the deep space sensors. What he saw made his heart stop. The probe was back, sitting exactly where it had been, but the timer showed only 3.7 seconds had passed. "That's impossible," Tae-min said, looking over Hyunwoo's shoulder. "Light takes 4 years to reach Proxima Centauri. Nothing can travel faster than light." So-Young was already downloading data from the probe's instruments. According to these readings, it did reach Proxima Centauri. "The star patterns match perfectly. But look at this." She pointed to strange numbers on her screen. "The hull temperature dropped to near absolute zero during the trip, and there are unusual metal stress patterns." Hyunwoo examined the probe itself. The metal surface showed tiny scratches and marks that had not been there before. Under a microscope, the scratches looked like they had been made by something with very sharp claws or teeth. What could cause damage like this in empty space? He wondered aloud. Tae-min was studying the energy readings from the trip. These numbers don't make sense. During the 3.7 seconds of travel, the probe's instruments detected something. Temperature readings that show both extreme cold and extreme heat at the same time. Gravity measurements that point in directions that don't exist, so Young pulled up more data. The probe's cameras recorded the journey. Most of it is just darkness, but there are a few frames that show, well, you need to see this, she put. The images on the main screen. Most showed nothing but black space, but 3 frames contained something else. Twisted shapes that hurt to look at directly. Colors that had no names. And in one frame, what looked like an eye the size of a planet, staring directly at the camera. That can't be real, Taemin said, but his voice was shaking. Hyunwoo studied the images carefully. Maybe it's just radiation damage to the camera, or interference from the void drive itself. But deep in his heart, he knew that was not true. The probe had traveled through somewhere else, somewhere between normal space and whatever lay beyond. And something in that place had noticed them. Word of their success spread quickly through Luna Station and then to Earth. Within hours, scientists and government officials were demanding to know everything about the void drive. The possibility of instant travel between stars was too important to ignore. Admiral Han Sol Choi arrived from Earth 2 days later with a team of military engineers. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Dr. Park," she said, shaking Hyunwoo's hand. "Your discovery could change everything for humanity. We need to move fast." "With respect, Admiral," Hyunwoo replied, "I think we need to move carefully. The probe came back damaged, and we recorded some very strange things during its journey." Admiral Choi looked at the scratched metal surface of the probe. "Probably just normal wear from space travel. The important thing is that it worked. How soon can you build a larger version?" So Young stepped forward. "Admiral, we really should study these anomalies first. The probe's instruments detected things that shouldn't exist. And these scratch marks, they were made during the journey, not before or after." "I'm sure your scientists can figure out any small problems," the Admiral said dismissively. "Right now, humanity has a chance to finally join the galactic community as equals. We can't waste this opportunity." That night, as Hyunwoo lay in his small quarters on Luna Station, he stared at the ceiling and worried. The void drive worked perfectly. Too perfectly. In his experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. He thought about the strange eye in the probe's camera footage. Had it really been looking at them? And if so, what did it want? Outside his window, Earth turned slowly. In the darkness, unaware that humanity had just taken its first step toward either greatness or disaster. Only time would tell which path they had chosen. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Deep space monitoring stations around the solar system had detected unusual energy readings coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri. Something was responding to their test, and it was heading toward Earth. 3 months after the probe test, the experimental ship Sejong floated in Earth's orbit like a metal whale. The vessel was humanity's first attempt at a manned void drive ship, built with the best technology they had. Admiral Han Sol Choi stood on the bridge, watching her crew prepare for humanity's first real journey to the stars. "All systems check complete," reported Commander Jin Nam, the ship's pilot. She was young for such an important mission, but she had the best reflexes and the strongest nerves of any pilot in the Earth fleet. "Void drive is ready for activation." Lieutenant Dong Hyun Yoon sat at the navigation station, his fingers dancing over the control panels. "Course laid in for Wolf 359 system, Admiral. Distance, 7.8 light-years. Estimated travel. Time using void drive, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Admiral Choi nodded. Wolf 359 was perfect for their first manned test. The system had a Galactic Council monitoring station, so they would have alien witnesses to humanity's achievement. More importantly, if something went wrong, help would be nearby. "Remember," the Admiral said to her crew of 20, "this is not just a test flight. This is humanity's announcement to the galaxy that we are no longer trapped in our solar system. Today, we become equals among the stars." Commander Nam's hands moved to the void drive controls. The bridge lights dimmed as power flowed to the massive engines. Through the viewports, space itself began to bend and twist around the ship. "Beginning void jump in 10 seconds, Nam announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump! The universe exploded into impossible colors. Commander Nam felt her consciousness stretch across dimensions she had no names for. Space folded around the Sejong like paper, but the paper was made of screaming darkness and hungry light. Through the ship's hull, she could hear something scratching, something trying to get inside. Lieutenant Yoon's navigation instruments went crazy, showing directions that pointed to places that did not exist. His screen displayed star charts of galaxies that were somehow both infinitely far away and directly behind his left shoulder. The crew experienced 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. Some saw their dead relatives standing in the corridors, smiling and beckoning them to follow. Others heard music that made them want to tear off their own ears. Chief Engineer Woo Bin Han watched in terror as his tools rearranged themselves into shapes that hurt his brain to look at. Through it all, something vast pressed against the outside of their ship. Commander Nam could feel its attention like ice water in her veins. Whatever lived in the space between spaces knew they were there, and it was very, very interested. Then, suddenly, normal space returned. The Sejong materialized near Wolf 359, exactly where Lieutenant Yoon had programmed them to appear. But they were not alone. 12 alien ships surrounded them, their weapons powered up and their comm channels broadcasting. Urgent warnings in dozens of different languages. "This is Council Monitor Station 779, came a translated voice over the radio. "Unknown human vessel, you are in violation of dimensional safety protocols. Power down your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded." Admiral Choi stared at the alien ships in confusion. "Dimensional safety protocols? What are they talking about?" Before she could respond, more messages flooded their communications. Ships throughout the Wolf 359 system were reporting strange sensor readings. Ancient warning systems that had been silent for millions of years were suddenly active. Emergency beacons were transmitting alerts in dead languages that even the Council's best translators could barely understand. "Admiral," Commander Nam said quietly, "something followed us out of the void." She was right. The space around the Sejong was wrong. Starlight bent at angles that made no sense. Shadows fell in directions where there was no light to cast them. And in the darkness between the stars, shapes moved that were too large and too strange to be natural. On Earth, Ambassador Yeon-Soo Kwon received an emergency message that made her blood run cold. The Galactic Council was calling an immediate assembly. Every species in known space was sending representatives to the Council chambers on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. The message was brief. "Humans have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. The galaxy is in danger." Yeon-Soo had been humanity's ambassador to the galaxy for 15 years. She had worked hard to improve relations between humans and alien species, slowly earning their respect despite humanity's technological limitations. Now, all of that progress might be destroyed. She traveled to Nexus Prime on the fastest Council ship available, but even that took 2 weeks. During the journey, reports came in from across the galaxy. Monitoring stations were detecting energy. Signatures unlike anything seen before. Ships were disappearing near the places where humans had tested their void drive. And ancient ruins on dead worlds were showing signs of activity for the first time in eons. The Council chambers were packed when Yeon-Soo arrived. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the vast circular room. The Nexari, tall and thin with crystalline skin, stood in their traditional formation. The lumens, beings of pure energy, flickered with nervous light patterns. The Kepler Collective, a hive mind species, spoke in perfect unison through their representative. At the center of the chamber, Council Supreme Arbiter Kelton Prime called for order. The alien's 4 arms gestured for silence as his translator device spoke in perfectly accented human English. "Ambassador Kwon," Kelton Prime said, his voice carrying across the chamber without amplification. "Your species has done something unprecedented. They have opened pathways that have been sealed for good reason since before most of our civilizations existed." Yeon-Soo stood at the human delegation's assigned position. "Honored Arbiter, humans have simply developed a new form of faster-than-light, travel. Surely this is cause for celebration, not alarm. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the alien audience, but it was not a happy sound. Ambassador, spoke historian Velath Prime of the Nexari, your species has not invented faster-than-light travel. They have rediscovered something far more dangerous. Something that destroyed the greatest civilization this galaxy has ever known. The chamber fell silent. Even the ever-present hum of the translation devices seemed muted. Millions of years ago, Velath Prime continued, there existed a species we call the Architects. They were masters of space and time, builders of wonders beyond imagination. They could travel instantly between the farthest stars, reshape entire solar systems, and bend the laws of physics to their will. Yeonsu felt a chill run down her spine. What happened to them? They vanished, the Nexari historian replied. In a single day, across the entire galaxy, every trace of their civilization disappeared. All that remained were ruins covered in warnings, written in languages that hurt to read. Warnings about the spaces between dimensions and the things that lived there. Another council member spoke up. This was Zeph 9 of the Collective, their voice speaking through hundreds of smaller beings that made up their shared consciousness. Your species calls their technology a void drive. The name is more accurate than they know. They are punching holes in the barriers that separate our reality from the void. The hungry darkness that exists between all possible worlds. The Architects made the same mistake, added a Lumen representative. Its energy form pulsing with urgent colors. They thought they could use the void safely. They were wrong. The things that live in the darkness between realities noticed their activities and began to push through into our dimension. Yeonsu's mouth went dry. Are you saying that humanity's void drive is dangerous to the entire galaxy? Not dangerous, Kelton Prime corrected. Catastrophic. Every time your ships use this technology, they weaken the barriers between realities. Each jump creates tiny tears in the fabric of space-time. Individually, these tears are small, but they add up, and they attract attention from entities that view our entire universe as food. The ambassador thought about the reports she had received, ships disappearing, ancient warnings activating, strange energy readings spreading across space. What do you want humanity to do? Stop, said every alien voice in the chamber at once. Stop using this technology immediately. Destroy all research. Forget everything you have learned about void travel. And if we refuse? The silence that followed was answer enough. Ambassador Quan, Kelton Prime said finally, understand that this is not a punishment or an attempt to keep humanity inferior. This is survival. The last time someone used void technology, it nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. We will not allow that to happen again. Yeonsu looked around the chamber, at hundreds of alien faces, all staring at her with a mixture of fear and determination. For the first time in her career as a diplomat, she had no idea what to say. On the Sejong, still surrounded by council ships near Wolf 359, Admiral Choi received new orders from Earth Command. They were to return home immediately and report everything they had experienced during their void jump. But as Commander Nam prepared the ship for another jump, she noticed something troubling. The scratches on the hull, scratches that had not been there before their first jump, were glowing with a faint purple light. And in the darkness of space around them, shadows were moving in patterns that followed no known laws of physics. Something was coming through the tears Ambassador Yeonsu Kwon sat in the restricted archives deep beneath the council chambers on Nexus Prime. The room was cold and quiet, filled with data crystals that contained the collected knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Across from her, Council historian Velath Prime activated an ancient storage device with his crystalline fingers. What I am about to show you, the Nexari said, is forbidden knowledge. For millions of years, the Council has kept these records sealed to prevent anyone from repeating the Architect's mistakes. The holographic display filled the air between them with images of incredible beauty. Cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants. Massive structures that wrapped around entire stars like jewelry. Ships the size of moons that could reshape matter with a thought. The Architects were magnificent, Velath Prime explained. They had conquered death, mastered time, and built wonders that made our greatest achievements look like children's toys. But they were not satisfied. They wanted to travel instantly across the galaxy, to be everywhere at once. Yansu watched, in fascination, as the hologram showed architect ships simply vanishing from one star system and appearing in another. How did they do it? The same way your species is doing it now. They found a way to punch holes through the barriers between dimensions and travel through the void between realities. At first, it seemed perfect. They could cross the galaxy in moments instead of years. The images changed, showing architect scientists working with strange machines that hurt to look at directly. The devices seemed to bend space around themselves, creating twisted patterns in the air. But the void is not empty, Veleth Prime continued. It is home to entities that exist between the spaces we understand. Things that hunger for the energy and matter of our reality. The architects thought they could use the void without consequences. They were wrong. The hologram showed new images. Now, architect worlds covered in darkness, their great cities silent and empty. In the shadows between buildings, impossible shapes, moved with predatory grace. The hungry dark, Veleth Prime whispered. That is what the architects called them in their final transmissions. Entities that exist in the spaces between atoms, between thoughts, between moments. Every time the architects used their void technology, they weakened the barriers that kept these things out of our reality. Yansu leaned forward, studying the images more carefully. What happened to the architects? They were consumed. Not killed. Consumed. Their entire civilization was absorbed by the entities they had accidentally summoned. The hungry dark ate their thoughts, their memories, their very existence. It was as if the architects had never existed at all, except for the ruins they left behind. The historian activated another display, showing the last transmission ever received from the architect homeworld. The translation appeared in glowing text. They come through the tears we made, the void hungers. Seal the ways. Let no one follow our path. The price of speed is existence itself. Yonsu felt sick. How long did this take? From the first void jump to the complete destruction of their civilization? Less than 50 years. And the architects were far more advanced than any current species, including humans. On Earth, Dr. Yunji Shin studied the data that Ambassador Quan had transmitted from Nexus Prime. As humanity's leading xenoarchaeologist, she had spent her career studying alien ruins and artifacts, but nothing had prepared her for the architect records. She worked in a secure laboratory beneath the Earth Defense Command headquarters, surrounded by classified materials and armed guards. The holographic displays showed architect technology that was both beautiful and terrifying. Dr. Shin called her research partner, Dr. Min-Ho Jung, from across the lab. You need to see this analysis of the void drive energy signatures. Yunji walked over to his workstation, where complex equations filled multiple screens. What am I looking at? Energy readings from every human void jump so far, Min-Ho explained. I've compared them to the theoretical models from the architect data. The patterns are identical. Yunji studied the waveforms and energy spikes. That means we're following exactly the same path the architects did. Every jump weakens the dimensional barriers in the same way. We're making the same mistakes they made. Meanwhile, in his laboratory on Luna Station, Dr. Wu Jin Kang was making his own disturbing discoveries. As one of humanity's best theoretical physicists, he had been asked to analyze the fundamental principles behind the void drive. The mathematics are elegant, he said to his assistant, Dr. Young-Soo Park. Too elegant. Look at these equations. They describe a method for folding space that requires virtually no energy input once the initial tear is made. Young-Soo frowned at the numbers on his screen. That should be impossible. Einstein's theories require massive energy expenditures for faster-than-light travel. Exactly. The only way this works is if we're not actually providing the energy ourselves. Something else is doing most of the work. Wu Jin pointed to a series of calculations. These energy readings suggest that entities in the void are actively helping our ships travel. They want us to keep making holes in reality. The implications were terrifying. Humanity's greatest achievement was being aided by creatures that wanted to destroy them. Back on Nexus Prime, Yeon Su met with representatives from the three most powerful species in the galaxy. The Nexari, the Lumens, and the Kepler Collective had formed the core of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. Ambassador said, "Collective Representative Zeph-9, we must discuss your species' response to our warnings. Earth has not replied to our demands that they cease void drive research." Yonsu chose her words carefully. "My government is studying the information you provided. They want to understand the full scope of the threat before making any decisions." "There is no time for extended study," flashed the Lumen delegate in urgent color patterns. "Our monitoring stations report increasing dimensional instability throughout the galaxy. The barriers between realities are weakening faster than our models predicted." Veleth Prime activated a new holographic display showing the galaxy as a web of interconnected energy fields. Red warning markers appeared at dozens of locations. Every human void jump has created a weak point in dimensional space. But look, at this, the weak points are growing and connecting to each other. Yonsu stared at the display in horror. Lines of red energy were spreading across the galaxy like cracks in broken glass. "How long before?" "Before complete dimensional collapse," Zeph-9 finished. "At the current rate of human void drive usage, perhaps 10 years, maybe less. And you're certain there's no way to make the technology safe?" The three aliens exchanged glances that conveyed volumes without words. Finally, Veleth Prime spoke. "Ambassador, the architects asked the same question. They were the most intelligent species ever to exist in this galaxy. They had millions of years to find a solution. They failed. What happened to the entities from the void after the architects were destroyed? They returned to the spaces between realities, satisfied with their feast. The dimensional barriers slowly healed over millions of years, but the scars remain, and they make our reality vulnerable to future incursions." The Lumen delegate pulsed with somber colors. "This is why all current galactic faster-than-light technology is deliberately limited. We could build faster drives, but we choose not to. Speed is not worth the risk of extinction." That night, Yonsu sat in her quarters aboard the diplomatic station, staring out at the stars and thinking about impossible choices. Humanity had finally achieved their dream of true interstellar travel, but using it might destroy everything. Her secure communication terminal chimed with an incoming message from Earth. President Sang-Ho Kim appeared on the screen, his face grave with worry. "Ambassador Kwan," the president said, "we've received disturbing reports from our deep space monitoring stations. Several council ships have disappeared near the locations where we tested the void drive. Are we responsible for this?" Yonsu felt her heart sink. "Mr. President, I believe we may be. The entities that live in the void are already beginning to push through the weak points we've created." "How many ships?" 7 confirmed missing. 3 more overdue and presumed lost. President Kim was quiet for a long moment. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. The military and scientific communities here are not willing to give up the void drive. They believe it's humanity's path to equality with the other galactic species. Sir, with respect, equality won't matter if we accidentally destroy the galaxy. I know, but convincing everyone else of that is going to be difficult. The Council needs to provide more proof than just historical records and theoretical models." After the transmission ended, Yonsu realized that humanity was about to face its greatest test. Would they choose wisdom over ambition? Would they sacrifice their greatest achievement to save everyone, including their enemies? Outside her window, the stars shone with cold light, unaware that the fate of trillions of living beings might depend on the decisions made by one small, stubborn species that had just learned to reach beyond their solar system. In the void between realities, ancient intelligences stirred with growing hunger. The barriers were weakening exactly as they had millions of years ago. Soon, they would be able to feed again on the rich energy of normal. Captain Jae-Sung Park stood on the bridge of the Dokdo, humanity's newest and most advanced void drive vessel. Unlike the experimental Sejong, this ship was built for military operations. It carried a crew of 50 and enough firepower to take on a small fleet. Today, they were making humanity's first official exploration mission using the controversial technology. "Navigation ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Subin Cho from her station. She was the fleet's best navigator, handpicked for this mission, because of her perfect record with conventional FTL drives. But she had never traveled through the void before, and her hands shook slightly as she entered the coordinates. "Destination is the Vega system," announced Commander Quan-Ho Lee from the tactical station. "Intelligence reports suggest there may be habitable worlds there. If we can establish a human colony beyond Council space, it would prove the value of our void drive technology." Captain Park nodded and settled into his command chair. "Begin void jump sequence." The familiar purple glow surrounded the ship as space began to fold around them. But this time, something was different. As the Docto slipped between dimensions, the crew saw shapes moving in the darkness outside their hull, geometric forms that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, pressing against their reality like predators testing a fence. "Captain," whispered Navigator Cho, her voice filled with terror. "There's something out there. Something huge." Through the viewports, impossible sights unfolded. Structures that curved through spaces that did not exist. Lights that cast shadows in directions that had no names. And everywhere, the sense of vast intelligences watching them with hungry interest. Chief Engineer Seok Jin Bai monitored the ship's systems from his station in the engine room. "Power fluctuations across all decks," he reported over the intercom. "Something is interfering with our systems." "How long until we reach normal space?" Captain Park asked. 30 seconds, Cho replied, but her voice sounded strange, distant. When they emerged near Vega, the crew of the Docto discovered they were not alone. 3 Council monitoring ships waited for them, their weapon systems powered but not yet targeting the human vessel. "Human ship Docto," came a transmission in accented English. "This is Council Monitor Kelton 7. You are ordered to return to your home system immediately. This region of space has been declared a dimensional hazard zone." Captain Park opened a communication channel. "Council Monitor, we are conducting a peaceful exploration mission. We have every right to be here." "Negative, Captain Park. Our sensors detected massive dimensional disturbances when your ship emerged from void travel. You have brought something with you from the spaces between realities." Before Captain Park could respond, his science officer called out from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting energy patterns that don't match any known physics. They're coming from everywhere around us." Lieutenant Cho suddenly gripped her navigation console, her eyes wide with terror. "Captain, I can see them. The things from the void. They're not just in the space between dimensions, they're here, in normal space all around us." "What are you talking about, Lieutenant?" "The shadows, sir. Look at the shadows between the stars. They're moving." Captain Park looked out the main viewport and felt his blood turn to ice. The darkness between stars was indeed moving, shifting and flowing like a living thing. Shapes that shouldn't exist, pressed against the boundaries of normal space, trying to push through. Over the next few weeks, similar reports came in from across human space. Navigator Cho was not the only crew member experiencing strange visions after void travel. Pilots and navigators who had made multiple jumps began reporting prophetic dreams, visions of dead civilizations, and an overwhelming sense that something vast and hungry was watching them. Dr. Sumin Ryu, the fleet's chief medical officer, examined affected crew members at the lunar medical facility. "The changes are subtle but consistent," she explained. To Admiral Han-Sol Choi, "Extended exposure to void travel appears to enhance certain brain functions related to dimensional perception." "Is that dangerous?" the Admiral asked. "We don't know yet. The crew members report being able to sense things that normal humans cannot perceive. They describe seeing between the spaces and hearing the whispers from nowhere. Some claim they can predict where dimensional tiers will appear next." Admiral Choi studied the medical reports. "Could this be useful? If our navigators can sense dimensional instabilities, maybe they can help us use the void drive more safely." Dr. Ryu shook her head. "Admiral, with respect, I don't think safety is possible. The affected crew members all report the same recurring nightmare. Vast entities that exist between realities, growing stronger each time we use the void drive. Meanwhile, Dr. Hyunwoo Park continued his research in his laboratory on Luna Station. But his latest discoveries filled him with dread. The void drive didn't just bend space-time. It literally tore holes in the fabric of the universe. And these wounds healed slowly. "Look at these readings," he said to his assistant, Dr. So-Young Kim. "Every location where we've tested the void drive shows persistent dimensional instability. The tiers we make don't close properly. So Young examined the data on her screen. It's worse than that. The unstable regions are growing, and they're starting to connect to each other. Hyunwoo pulled up a galactic map showing all known void. Drive test sites. Red zones marked areas of dimensional weakness, and yellow lines showed where the zones were beginning to merge. If this continues, we'll create a network of weak points across the galaxy. And based on the architect records, that's exactly what happened to their civilization. The situation grew worse when reports arrived of ships going missing near human test sites. Not human ships, council vessels that had been investigating the dimensional anomalies. The Meridian, a Nexari science ship, vanished while studying the space around Proxima Centauri. The energy-being crew of the Lumen vessel Bright Current simply stopped communicating while near the Wolf 359 system. General Mi-Young Lee of Earth. Defense Command received the missing ship reports in her secure office deep beneath the Korean peninsula. As Earth's senior military strategist, she understood the implications immediately. "We're not just threatening ourselves," she said to her aide, Colonel Jun-Ho Shin. "We're putting the entire galactic community at risk." "Ma'am, our intelligence suggests the Council is preparing a military response. Fleet movements indicate they're positioning ships around our solar system." General Lee studied the tactical displays showing Council ship positions. "How many vessels?" "Over 300. Ma'am, the largest fleet assemblage in recorded galactic history. They're not here to invade. They're here to quarantine us." The truth of the situation became clear when the few survivors from missing Council ships were recovered. Commander Tae-Hyun Kim of the rescue vessel Busan found the Nexari ship Meridian, drifting near Proxima Centauri, its hull covered in the same strange scratches that marked human ships after void travel. "Most of the crew was missing," he reported to Earth Command. "The 5 survivors we found were in a state of shock. They kept repeating the same phrase in their language. They came through the walls." The rescued Nexari, when they finally spoke, described encounters with entities that existed partially in normal space and partially in the void, creatures that could step through solid matter as if it were empty air, beings that fed on consciousness itself rather than physical matter. "They're not from another planet or another galaxy," explained the Nexari ship's science officer through a translator. "They're from the spaces between spaces, the gaps in reality that exist wherever nothing should be. Your species has given them doorways into our universe." Dr. Yoon-ji Shin analyzed the survivor accounts in her laboratory on Earth. The descriptions matched perfectly with the final architect records. Entities that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, creatures that could manipulate matter and energy by changing the fundamental constants of physics in small areas. "The architects called them the Hungry Dark," she explained to President Sang-Ho Kim during an emergency briefing. "But that name doesn't capture what they really are. They're not dark. They're the absence of everything: light, matter, energy, thought, existence itself. How do we fight them? According to the architect records, you can't. Physical weapons are useless against beings that exist mostly outside our dimensional framework. The only defense is to stop creating the tiers that let them through." But stopping the Void Drive program was easier said than done. Humanity had tasted the freedom of instant interstellar travel, and many were unwilling to give it up. Politicians argued that the alien warnings might be lies designed to keep humanity weak. Military leaders insisted they could find ways to use the technology safely. Captain Park, still commanding the Docto, received orders for another mission despite the growing dangers. His navigator, Lieutenant Cho, had become one of the most severely affected crew members. She could now sense dimensional instabilities across vast distances and predicted where entities would attempt to break through. "Captain," she said during their pre-flight briefing, "I can feel them gathering. Every time we jump, we make it easier for them to follow us back. They're learning how to use our technology against us." "What do you mean?" "The next time we open a tear in space, they won't just watch us pass." The largest fleet in galactic history hung in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, a collection of ships from every major species in known space. Admiral Han-Sol Choi watched them through the observation deck of Earth's orbital defense station, counting vessels that represented technologies humanity could barely comprehend. 347 ships confirmed, reported her intelligence officer, Commander Eugene Park. Nexari crystal ships that can phase through solid matter. Lumen energy vessels that exist partially in normal space. Kepler collective hive ships that function as single organisms, and at least 50 other species we've never encountered before. Admiral Choi studied the tactical display. They're not in an attack formation. They're in a containment pattern. Yes, ma'am. They've formed a sphere around our entire solar system. Nothing gets in or out without their permission. On the planet's surface, President Sang-Ho Kim convened an emergency session of Earth's Combined Defense Council. Representatives from every nation sat around the massive table in Geneva, their faces grim with the knowledge that humanity's future hung in the balance. The situation is clear, the president announced. The Galactic Council has given us an ultimatum. We must cease all void drive research immediately and destroy all existing technology or face forced quarantine. Defense Minister Jinwoo Lee stood up from his seat. Mr. President, we cannot simply surrender our greatest technological achievement. The void drive gives us the ability to compete with alien civilizations for the first time in our history. Compete? For what? Demanded Foreign Minister Hai Jin Kim. If we destroy the galaxy in the process, what's the point of competition? Science advisor Dr. Yoonji Shin activated a holographic display showing dimensional stability readings from across human space. The data is undeniable. Every void jump weakens the barriers between realities. We're creating a network of weak points that will eventually allow entities from outside our dimension to invade our universe. General Mi-young Lee of Earth Defense Command spoke from her position at the head of the table. Even if the aliens are correct about the danger, can we trust them? How do we know this isn't an elaborate scheme to prevent humanity from achieving technological superiority? Because, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, they're willing to die to stop us. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Yeon-soo. Kwan entering the room, her diplomatic uniform wrinkled from weeks of urgent travel between council worlds. Ambassador, President Kim said, we weren't expecting you back for another week. The situation has accelerated, Mr. President. 3 more council ships disappeared yesterday while investigating dimensional anomalies near our test sites. The crew of the Nexari vessel Wisdom of Ages managed to send one final transmission before they vanished. Yeon-soo activated her portable display, showing a recording that made everyone in the room fall silent. The image showed the bridge of an alien ship as reality itself seemed to tear open around them. Through the gaps in space, impossible shapes pressed into normal space-time, reaching for the terrified crew with appendages that existed in too many dimensions to fully perceive. That transmission lasted 17 seconds, the ambassador continued. It was recorded just before a ship carrying 1,200 beings simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed? Ceased. As if it had never been built in the first place. The president stared at the frozen image on the display. How many ships have we lost total? 15 confirmed, 8 more missing, and presumed consumed. That's over 4,000 intelligent beings who died because of our technology. Defense Minister Lee remained defiant. We didn't ask them to investigate our test sites. If they stayed away, they would be safe. Minister, Dr. Shin interrupted, the dimensional instabilities are spreading. They can't stay away. The weak points we've created are affecting the entire galactic region. Space itself is becoming unstable. Meanwhile, in deep space, Commander Jin-Ah Nam prepared the experimental ship Arirang for the most dangerous mission in human history. Her orders were to travel to the former architect homeworld and discover exactly what had happened to that ancient civilization. Are you certain about this, Commander? Asked her science officer, Dr. Moon-Soo Yang. The council records indicate that star system is uninhabitable. That's exactly why we need to see it, Nam replied. If humanity is going to make an informed decision about the void drive, we need to understand the full consequences of using this technology. The Arirang was humanity's most advanced ship, built specifically for extended void travel. It carried a crew of 12 volunteers, each aware that they might not return from their mission. Navigator Lieutenant Kyung-ho Seo plotted their course on the ship's advanced systems. Distance to the architect homeworld is 8,000 light-years. Using conventional FTL, the journey would take 6 months. With the void drive, we can be there in 43 minutes. But we'll have to make the longest void jump ever attempted, added Chief Engineer In-Soo Choi. We'll be traveling through unstable dimensional space for almost an hour. No one knows what that kind of extended exposure will do to us. Commander. Nam looked around at her crew. Final chance to reconsider. This mission is voluntary. No one left their station. Then let's find out what the architects discovered in their final days. The void jump began normally, with space folding around. The Ari rang in the familiar purple glow. But as they traveled deeper into the space between dimensions, the crew began to experience things that challenged their sanity. Dr. Yang reported impossible sensor readings. "Commander, my instruments are detecting structures in the void. Massive constructions that exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. What kind of structures? They appear to be cities, or what's left of cities. I'm reading energy signatures that match architect technology, but they're twisted, changed into forms that shouldn't be possible." Navigator SEO struggled with his instruments as space itself seemed to rebel against their presence. "Something is following us, Commander. Multiple contacts moving through dimensions we can't perceive." Through the viewports, the crew saw sights that would haunt them forever. The ruins of architects' ships floating in the void, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes. Entire planets that existed partially in multiple dimensions at once. Their surfaces covered in structures that hurt to look at directly, and everywhere the sense of vast intelligences watching them, studying them, learning from their passage through the spaces between realities. 30 minutes to destination, CO announced, but his voice was strained with fear. When they finally emerged at the architect homeworld, what they found defied every law of physics humanity understood. Where a planet should have been, there was instead a wound in space itself, a hole in reality that revealed the hungry darkness beyond. The star system was wrong in ways that had no names. Gravity flowed in directions that didn't exist. Light traveled in curves that led nowhere. And at the center of it all, something vast and impossible pressed against the boundaries of normal space-time. "Commander," whispered Dr. Yang, "the entire star system has been partially absorbed into the void. The planet isn't gone. It's been pulled halfway into another dimension." Commander Nam stared at the impossible sight through the main viewport. Through the tears in reality, she could see fragments of architect cities, their magnificent buildings twisted into forms that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. And moving among the ruins, entities that fed on the very concept of existence itself. "Record everything," she ordered. "Humanity needs to see what happens when you use void technology without restraint." But as they prepared to leave, the entities in the wounded space began to take notice of their ship. Through the gaps in reality, impossible appendages reached toward the Arirang, trying to pull it into the spaces between dimensions. "Emergency jump," Nam shouted. "Get us out of here now." The return journey was a nightmare of dimensional distortions and entity encounters. The crew experienced visions of Earth's future. Their beautiful blue world transformed into another wound in space, its population consumed by the hungry dark. When they finally reached Sol system, the Arirang was changed. Its hull bore the same strange scratches that marked all ships after void travel, but the markings glowed with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with something vast and alien. Commander Nam's transmission to Earth Command contained only 4 words, repeated over and over with increasing desperation. "They're already coming through." Back on Earth, President Kim received the report from the Arirang mission just as Council's Supreme Arbiter Kelton Prime delivered the final ultimatum. The alien leader's image appeared on screens across the planet, his 4 arms spread in a gesture that conveyed both authority and desperation. "People of Earth," Kelton Prime said, "your representatives have seen the fate that awaits all reality if void technology continues to be used. We give you one final choice. Destroy your void drive, research and accept limitation, or face quarantine by force." "And if we refuse quarantine?" President Kim asked during the live transmission. "Then we will destroy your civilization to save the galaxy," the Arbiter replied. "Understand that this brings us no joy, but we will not allow another architect situation to develop. Too many species have already died because of your experiments." The transmission ended, leaving. Dr. So-Young Kim stared at her instruments in horror as dimensional distortions appeared simultaneously across human space. From her monitoring station on Luna, she watched reality itself begin to tear apart as massive dimensional rifts opened, near every location where humanity had tested the void drive. "Dr. Park," she called to her colleague, The dimensional barriers are collapsing, all of them, at the same time. Dr. Hyun-woo Park rushed to her workstation and looked at the readings. Energy signatures that violated every known law of physics were erupting from 11 different star systems. It's not random. Something is coordinating this. The entities aren't waiting for us to weaken the barriers further. They're forcing their way through. Across the galaxy, Council fleets found themselves fighting an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. Ships that existed in normal space one moment would suddenly phase into 11 dimensions simultaneously, becoming impossible to target or even perceive properly. Near Proxima Centauri, the Nexari battle group Crystal Honor engaged entities that looked like geometric shapes, with too many angles. Their weapons passed harmlessly through targets that existed mostly outside normal space-time. All weapons ineffective, reported Captain Veth Prime to the Council Fleet Command. Enemy vessels appeared to delete our weapons fire from existence, rather than absorbing or deflecting it. At Wolf 359, Admiral Hansol Choi watched from the bridge of her flagship as reality itself became a battlefield. The human defense fleet fought alongside alien ships against enemies that seemed to follow no consistent physical laws. Contact bearing 37 Mark 6, reported her tactical officer. I can't describe what it is, Admiral. My instruments show it simultaneously in front of us, behind us, and inside our own hull. Target it anyway and fire, Admiral Choi ordered. The weapon's fire simply vanished as it approached the entity, as if the concept of energy projectiles ceased to exist in the creature's vicinity. In response, the entity reached out with appendages that passed through the ship's armor like it was empty space, touching crew members who simply disappeared. Back on Earth, President Sang-ho Kim convened an emergency session in the deep underground, bunker beneath Seoul. The planet's leaders watched helplessly as reports flooded in from across human space. 17 Council ships confirmed destroyed, reported General Mi-young Lee. 43 more missing and presumed consumed. The entities are adapting to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. What about our own losses? President Kim asked. 8 human vessels destroyed, including the exploration ship Cheonan. But sir, these things aren't just destroying ships, they're erasing them. The Cheonan didn't explode or break apart, it simply stopped existing. Our sensors can't even detect debris. Dr. Hyun-woo Park appeared on the communication screen from Luna Station. Mr. President, I've discovered something important. The entities aren't just randomly attacking. They're systematically widening the dimensional tiers we created. Every ship they consume makes the rifts larger. What does that mean for us? It means they're preparing for a full-scale invasion. Once the tiers are large enough, they'll be able to bring through entities too large to fit through the current openings. Meanwhile, Dr. Woo Jin Kang worked frantically in his laboratory with Chief Engineer Nam Ho Song. Together, they had developed a theoretical solution to the crisis, but it required a sacrifice that might be too great to accept. The mathematics are clear, Woo Jin explained to the Emergency Council via secure transmission. We can't close the dimensional tiers using conventional technology, but we can collapse them. What's the difference? Asked President Kim. Closing them would seal the rifts and allow the barriers to heal naturally over millions of years. Collapsing them would destroy the tiers by eliminating the space around them. It would trap the entities in their own dimension permanently. Chief Engineer Song continued the explanation. But the energy requirements are enormous. We would need to overload a void drive to the point where it creates a cascading dimensional collapse. The explosion would tear apart local space-time and reform it without the weak points. That sounds like exactly what we need, said Defense Minister Jin Woo Lee. There's a problem, Woo Jin admitted. The overload has to be triggered from inside the largest dimensional rift. Someone would have to pilot a ship directly into the tear between realities and detonate the drive manually. There would be no possibility of escape. The bunker fell silent as the implications sank in. Saving the galaxy would require the complete destruction of humanity's void drive technology and the lives of everyone brave enough to undertake the mission. How many people would we need for this? President Kim asked quietly. A minimum crew of 12, Engineer Song replied. Someone to pilot the ship, navigate through 11-dimensional space, maintain the overloaded drive, and ensure the detonation occurs at the precise moment for maximum effect. Captain Jae-sung Park stepped forward from his position at the tactical Display. Mr. President, the crew of the Docto volunteers for this mission. Captain, you understand what you're volunteering for? Yes, sir. We've all seen what these entities do to living beings. We've watched them erase entire ships from existence. If we don't stop them here, they'll consume the entire galaxy, starting with Earth. Navigator Lieutenant Subin Cho, who had been most affected by extended void travel, spoke up from her position. Sir, I can sense the largest dimensional rift. It's forming near the Vega system where we first encountered the entities. The tear is enormous, big enough for creatures the size of planets to pass through. How long do we have? President, Kim asked. Maybe 6 hours before the rift is wide enough for a full invasion, Cho replied. After that, conventional space-time will begin unraveling across this entire galactic region. The decision was made quickly. The Docto would be modified, with an overloaded void drive, and sent to the largest dimensional rift. The explosion would destroy the ship, its crew, and hopefully collapse all the tiers that humanity had accidentally created. Dr. Wu Jin Kang and Engineer Song worked alongside the ship's crew to modify the void drive. The process was dangerous. They were essentially building the largest bomb ever conceived, one that would explode across 11 dimensions simultaneously. The modifications are complete, Song reported to Captain Park. The drive will maintain overload for exactly 17 minutes before detonation. That should give us enough time to reach the center of the dimensional rift. Lieutenant Cho studied her navigation charts one final time. Captain, I need to warn you about what we'll encounter during the journey. The space inside the rift isn't like normal space. Physics works differently there. We may experience time distortions, reality, loops, and encounters with entities that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Will we be able to complete the mission? I believe so, sir, but we'll see things that no human was meant to see. And we won't be coming back. As the Docto prepared to depart, messages of support flooded in from across human space and beyond. Even the alien species that had been threatening humanity with quarantine now offered their respect for the sacrifice humanity was about to make. Council's Supreme Arbiter Kelton Prime transmitted a personal message to Captain Park. Captain, your species has shown that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when to stop. If your mission succeeds, humanity will be remembered not as the civilization that nearly destroyed the galaxy, but as the one that saved it. The final launch sequence began with Earth's entire population watching. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Docto, surrounded by his crew of volunteers. Each person aboard had chosen to sacrifice their life for the chance to save trillions of other beings. All stations report ready, announced Commander Quan Ho Lee. Drive overload initiated, confirmed Chief Engineer Seok Jin Bae. 17 minutes to detonation. Course laid in for the dimensional rift, reported Navigator Cho. Ready for final void jump. Captain Park looked around at his crew one last time. These brave men and women had volunteered to travel into the space between realities and face entities that existed beyond human comprehension. They would never see Earth again, never return to their families, never know if their sacrifice had been successful. Take us home, he said quietly. The Docto disappeared into the purple glow of void space for the last time. As the ship traveled toward its destination, the crew experienced the full horror of the spaces between dimensions. They saw the ruins of the architect civilization, twisted into impossible shapes by entities that fed on existence itself. They encountered creatures that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, beings that communicated through concepts that had no translation into human language, and through it all, they maintained their course toward the center of the largest dimensional rift. When they reached their destination, the crew of the Docto found themselves inside a wound in reality itself. The space around them defied every law of physics, filled with entities that pressed against the barriers between dimensions like hungry predators. Detonation in 30 seconds, announced Engineer Bae. Captain Park opened a final transmission to Earth. Mission Control, this is the Docto. We are in position. Tell everyone back home that humanity chose correctly. We chose to protect the galaxy rat.